look a little bit differently. Maybe I can invite, that was Danielle and Claudio. I'm gonna try Claudio. Invite Claudio. Something's loading. I think that's a good sign.
Bye.
Super.
Hi.
Hi, Claudio.
Hi.
Good. I don't know if you know, I've been actually fiddling around here for about 10 minutes trying to get Balint on.
Yes.
But thank you for showing up.
Oh, I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, Balint and I did discuss kind of a overall structure and some questions. So I hope, do you mind, I can host up to 2 guests. So when Balint shows up, we can join. On the right side of your screen, you'll see there's a live chat versus viewers. If you go to live chat, people show up and say, we can, make comments and ask questions. So but let's jump into it right now. Claudio, I'm in health information technology, and obviously things like APIs and software architectures are important for designing better systems in healthcare. That's apparently Balint has got a healthcare angle. Now, this doesn't have to be about healthcare specifically, but some of the folks like Danielle are from healthcare information technology, and they're hearing about microservices. I downloaded Jolie and is it Jolie or Jolie?
Jolie. Like Angelina Jolie, yeah.
Very good. Played around. Yeah, it's hard when you Google it. It's kind of hard to find it because of all the Angelina. So I guess we start with could you because folks can watch this later. This is recorded and people can replay it. We're going to start with a little bit of an introduction and then a series of general questions and more specific. So let me just say we're officially starting now. And I'm Chuck Webster, and I'm interested in workflow in healthcare, and particularly software that can help with workflows in healthcare. I found the Jolie website, and in health IT, we're beginning to hear more about microservices. So that's why I reached out and started to interact with you and Balint through Twitter. So that's my introduction. So Claudio, could you kind of introduce yourself?
Yes, and thank you very much for inviting me in this talk. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm one of the 2 co-inventors of a Jolie language. We started, me and Fabrizio. Unfortunately, Fabrizio cannot be here now, even if he would like to be here. But here in Italy, it's Christmas. Everybody's moving to reach his family, and Fabrizio is on the road for going back to his family. And we started to develop Jolie in 2006. And we started by analyzing service-oriented architectures. Okay, I didn't see you.
Did I go away?
Okay. You disappear, but can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, I can hear. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we started the university to study web services and service-oriented architecture and WSBPL. Okay, I don't know if you know this engine for orchestration. And by analyzing them, we developed a process algebra for describing its behavior, okay? And starting from this formal model, we developed the language, Jolie, that at the beginning was like a toy, but year after year, it became to be a very strong technology. And now we are using it in our customers comes from the industrial side, not from the healthcare. Indeed, this is why I'm very interested that you are trying to use it in this kind of area. And so we are very happy because when we started, we didn't think to microservices that came later. And when this new keyword came up, we realized that, wow, we are doing microservices without knowing that they are microservices. So I think our approaches could be useful for everybody that is approaching this new kind of architectures. Okay, I don't know your impressions about the usage of Jolie in healthcare, but I'm very curious to know it. And if you tried in concrete or environment or not.
Okay, that's great. Good introduction. And let's start with, because there are folks here from Health IT who do not know what a microservice is, like I did until recently. And so just what is a microservice?
From my point of view.
Well, trying to speak, if you could explain it so that maybe like 30 seconds or 45 seconds for a non-programmer, and then you're welcome to then spend 30 or 40 seconds on, okay, you're a programmer.
A microservice is an independent application, usually small, that provide small functionalities that can be deployed in an independent way. Okay, so there is another one that is joined. Okay.
Yes, that's Balint, I believe.
But since from our point of view, we studied microservices starting from a linguistic approach, for us, a microservice is also logical and a software artifact that you can program concretely. Okay. Then you can decide to deploy it inside a container. Okay. Or Balint is.
Yeah, we've been having trouble getting Balint on. There's always technical issues, browser compatibility and so forth. So we're glad that you're here, and I'm sure he would be happy that you're filling in for Balint. So anyway, here's from a workflow perspective. When I looked at microservices, in fact, there's a fellow here, Mark Copenhaver. Right. Getting a little bit of feedback from your end.
Maybe it's my microphone. Okay, I can just.
Anyway, so my exposure to the word service came from working with Mark, and this was an electronic health record, I don't know, almost 20 years ago. And services were steps in a workflow, okay? And these services were serving up screens to users. They were getting lab results, and you could construct workflows, and there was a workflow engine. Now that was in a kind of a client service environment. Of course, now when I look at microservices, the services can be in various places on the internet,
distributed,
distributed. And so that I'm just kind of explaining where I come from and how, when I look at microservices, and I'm reminded of, there are issues, for example, in electronic health record, in the health IT industry involving interoperability. And you've got maybe 2 or 3 different healthcare organizations, a physician office, a hospital, a radiology, imaging center. And really the workflows should span, for the patient, they really are spanning multiple organizations. So the beginning of an encounter involves multiple organizations, multiple people within the organizations, and this workflow has a series of steps, and it needs to be monitored, orchestrated, escalated, tracked, analytics applied to it. And so when I look at microservices, I think of how it might fit into the health IT industry in creating more seamless workflows between healthcare organizations. Does that seem like there's a potential in your regard, given that vision that I'm painting for Jolie or microservices to help?
Yes, I think absolutely yes. The main advantage with Jolie in particular is that everything is distributed is natively distributed. So also programmer and developers can think directly in a distributed way. So the scenarios you described are inherently distributed. So I think that if you have a language that allows you to immediately define and develop in a distributed way, you can have a lot of benefits in the production and the development of this kind of softwares. And we worked a lot on the fact to realize Jolie is very easy to be adopted by everybody. And I don't know if what is your experience, but the users we know, they are very happy about the fact that it's very easy to build and to develop a distributed environment by just writing few lines of code. And I think that this fact can help in improving time to develop it in a very smart way, easy way, and make tests, and then help in reducing time in development these kind of softwares that are usually very complex, because you can understand that you can have a lot of microservices in your architecture, and then you need some kind of tools that allows you to govern all of them. Okay, so the language is trying to give a meaning for addressing this kind of software in a very easy way for everybody. Okay, this is, I think the. Okay, go.
So, well, okay. Now, I'm sorry that Balint is on, and on the chat on Twitter, he's been trying to get things working. But I do kind of want to mention that he actually, in preparing for this, created 3 examples.
Yes, indeed.
On GitHub.
I was very curious to listen to you.
Did you look at the FireTalk Jolie code that's on GitHub that Balint created?
Yes, no, I'm trying to get it. Okay. Wait.
So it said B Maschio.
Yes.
On GitHub. I'm looking right now at the code, and maybe you could actually kind of explain, even though you didn't write the code, maybe you could explain its structure. And I see Balint again, so I'm going to click on Balint and invite him. And that's if he gets on. We've tried this a half a dozen times. Anyway, so for example, I'll give you. So example 3. He has, let me just list the names of the objects, the software objects, and that might be useful to, so there's something called an image CT server, an image PET server, positron emission tomography, orchestration service, a patient data object, and then I see public / interfaces, image interface, image 1, okay, those are the JPEGs is the data. And kind of, so obviously he whipped that up. I'm gonna move over to here. There's so Balint. If you click on live chat, on the right, see that he posted. In fact, other folks, if you want to click on that link, you can see that the code that he created. So let me ask Balint, how long did you spend on this code? And what your and then maybe Claudio, who is kind of poking around and looking at the code, just maybe from the name, he spent about 4 hours writing the code, and maybe now we had talked about doing a possible demo, but he was not able to get on. But just Claudio, from your looking at the server and the interfaces and so forth, at a high level, can you kind of reverse engineer his thinking and say, well, this is probably what he was trying to accomplish? Or just maybe just describe the structure of a typical Jolie distributed microservice program in in this healthcare context, which is what Balint was intending. So Balint's saying there's 3 base services.
3 base services, yes, that are which are image CT server, image PET server, these ones. And the orchestrator, maybe, yes. Okay. So, kind of, what do you think? So, between you, Balint typing in the activity stream and you looking at the code, can you put together kind of a description of the architecture of this health IT system, this little prototype, and what advantages might result from it being implemented in Jolie? Okay, I just can try to comment the code that I see here. And if you open, for example, the orchestrator, there is one file that is server.ol, and then just when you look at the server inside the code, you can just, the first thing that you can notice is that from line 12 to line 34, you have the declaration of for output ports, okay?
Are we in the third example?
I'm in the third one. Third
third
one,
example, okay,
and
so-
the folder is, you want to comment the first one, the first example, you prefer
Image CT server?
image SCT
Image-
server, you prefer this one, okay.
Whichever one you want us to go to. Which code would you like us to click on?
I was commenting, I'm commenting the orchestrator service.
Okay, so click on
the
the
third
orchestrator. I'm looking at the server.ol, and we are looking at the
Yeah.
code, and you were okay. I have it lined up here. And from where to where were you? Are you talking about from what line to what line are you looking at right now?
The first thing that I would like to notice is that from line 12 to line 34, you have the
12 to
declarations
34.
of
Okay.
4 output ports. Okay, right. What does it mean? This means that this orchestrator has 4 dependencies. It requires 4 other microservices to work that are image port PAT, image port CT, patient data, and patient read data. Right?
Yes.
So this means that this orchestrator is able to orchestrate 4 other microservices. I don't know. I don't know the code. What do they?
Sure, well, let me just, okay, both PET, positron emission tomography, and CT,
okay.
Those are both machines that take images, pictures
Yeah.
of inside the body. And so in healthcare, you see a generalist, and the generalist says, oh, we need to send you to a specialist or get a picture taken and get that radiologist to read that image, and then come back and we will look at the results of that analysis of the image. So I imagine that Balint, who I believe 10 years ago did some healthcare imaging in his background, he was motivated by that. But anyway, so we have an orchestrator, I don't know, I think of object service, and it is in these output ports. We have 4 output ports, and those are on for what other services?
Yes, as Balint is saying now, he would like to expose one unique interface that I think is that of the orchestrator, in order to orchestrate 4 other. Because I don't. There is also aggregation here. So Balint, you start with a little bit complex example. Okay. So
this is the third example. So
yes, maybe
we're
we
jumping in
from the.
Right. But I wanted to jump into the third example because when I looked at it, I saw more clinically oriented
Okay,
terminology.
because it's more on topic.
Okay. So, and I'm just learning about this stuff, but the idea of having a one service sort of front for other services, or one microservice front for other microservices, are there terms for that, like decorator or facade, or is there some kind of a pattern that is being used there? Pattern, a programming pattern?
Yes, here, as you can see, in line 36, there is one input port that is called server port. Okay, this means that this is the listener where the orchestrator is listening for messages. Okay, so the orchestrator will receive the messages from in port 8003, and the protocol is SODEP, that is the protocol of Jolie. And it exposes here in this location the interface, orchestrator interface. Okay, that means we can look at this interface where did you put the interfaces? Public interfaces. Okay, so If you go up and you go to folder public interfaces,
Okay,
here
so
you
we're
have,
backing out here to server,
yeah,
to public interfaces, and we're in
Yeah.
the FireTalk Jolie code, third
yeah,
example of the GitHub link that Balint posted.
yeah.
And now we
Here-
click on interfaces.
And here you have the orchestrator, the interfaces of the used microservices. In particular, you have orchestrator interface. Okay, if you open this, you can
Okay.
see that in this interface, Balint has declared one operation that is called create patient image. Okay, that receive a request message that is called create patient image request, and replies with another message that is called create patient image response. Okay. As a request, on top of this file, you have the declaration of the message types. That is type create patient image request that contains 6 subnodes: patient ID, image type, exam ID, image Y pose, and image X position. Okay.
Are we? Wait a minute. Now we are in the FireTalk Jolie code, third example, public interface is
Here.
Orchestrator Interface.iol. Is that correct?
Yeah. Here.
Okay. And what lines are you referring to?
This is the type. The request type is
I got it
from
right.
line 2
Okay.
to line 9. This one.
She said 6 nodes is kind of which the terminology used, I believe.
Yeah. I don't know these nodes, what they represent, but I think they are some information related to the image that you want to process.
Right.
Something like.
So you got the raw image, you have the patient ID, we have a type, we have an exam ID, an image Y position versus image X position. I'm not sure what that would refer to. Maybe, maybe Balint can make a comment.
Yeah.
In live chat. Okay, there it is. Yeah.
The position in the
got
scan.
it.
Okay.
The position in the scan. Okay, I got it. So he's referring to a, so it's like you're referring to a particular place in the image.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's kind of a communication, indexical sort of thing. Well, as best you can, Claudio, if you could kind of continue to kind of try to figure out what Balint was up to.
Okay, so take in mind this interface and then go back to the server.ol that you can find in the orchestrator service folder here.
Okay, orchestration service folder,
here.
server.ol.
Okay, come back here. Then if you go to line 53, there is
53, main, okay.
There is the main. What is the main? The main is the scope where you define the behavior of all the operations of your orchestrator. If you remember, in the interface, you declare that there is an operation that is called create patient image, okay? And as you can see in line 55, you have actually the implementation of this operation, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Then inside, there is some kind of operation, and in particular, it checks if the image type is a PET.
Mm-hmm.
It sends a request, a set image request to image port PET. That is another microservice, okay? Otherwise, if the image type is a CT, the request is sent to image port CT. So it changes the request depending on the data, on the image type node. Okay. Then it print out to the console the response, and it finishes by setting this data and calling the insert patient image data. That means I think that you want to store the adding the record on the DB. Yes, because patient data, I think it represents the microservice that governs the database. Right, Balint? I think yes.
How are we doing, Balint?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Perfect. So this is a very simple orchestrator that receive requests, then check the image type, and then depending on the image type, call the related service for PET or CT images. Okay.
And we have a question here from Manish. So the question is, so the idea is different microservices for each of the different imaging modalities?
In this case, Balint set the 2 different microservices with the same interface. Since I'm really not very deep in this kind of area, I cannot propose different architecture, but maybe we can also have different a different design. But in this case,
well, let me just so for example, in workflow systems, you know, because you often are abstract away from the data. And you really only care. You really only care that there's a task. We want the image read. I don't know what the image is. I don't know whether it's a PET image or it's a CT image or some other kind of image. I just know I want it read. I want to get a result back. And so what's happening here is a kind of a procedural abstraction that allows me to just, you know, just here's the image. Tell me about it. And I don't want to have to know exactly which microservice to call. I just want you to figure that out. And of course, it does that based on, you know, some bit of metadata about the image.
Yes. Here, the interesting point is that both the image port CT microservice and the image port PET microservice, they share the same interface. Okay, we can check it, because if you go to line 18 and line 12, you have the declaration of the output port of image port PET microservice and image port CT microservice. As you can see, in line 15 and 21, you have the declaration of the same interface. This means that both the microservice have the same interfaces, okay? And this is why at line 61 and at line 65, you call the same operation for both of them. So you have just an abstraction of the operation set image that is equal for all the microservices that process this kind of images, and just you differentiate the image type, just giving specific microservice for all of them. Okay, so you will have a microservice for PET images, a microservice for CT images, and then so on if other images can be added. I don't know.
Well, let me ask then some questions, if you don't mind. It was useful to take a look at Balint's code. Thank you very much, Balint, for going to that trouble. Maybe I'll circle back and maybe we can have some written conversation because that's for another time. So when I looked at the Jolie documentation and examples, I saw discussions of kind of classic workflow patterns, such as split, mutually exclusive workflows, workflows happening in parallel, workflow join, you know, two different processes happening concurrently, and then they join together. And there was a kind of, I don't know if it was a set of slides, but there was a kind of an impression given that this is a good language for programming kind of familiar or often seen workflow patterns. Is that true? And could you kind of elaborate a little bit on that?
So here in the code, you can see that we use semicolon, okay? That is not used as usual in the other languages, but here in Jolie, semicolon represents a compositional operator that is the sequential one. So every time you use semicolon, you are saying this activity must be processed in a sequential way before the next one, okay? If you replace the semicolon with
The vertical pipe.
Vertical
the
pipe, yes, the pipe.
Whatever
yes,
you want to,
yeah,
I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
This is the parallel composition. So you, by simply type this operator, you can compose in parallel inside the orchestrator 2 activities. For example, I don't know, if you want to call the set image operation for 2 different microservices in parallel, you just compose them with using the pipe. The orchestrator inside spawn 2 different threads for these 2 activities that are executed in parallel. When the parallel is finished, you can go on. So I can say you can write. I try to write here. Okay, maybe you can write A parallel B.
I actually wrote some code using the parallel workflow operator. And unfortunately, I can't figure out how to, I could cut and paste the code into the activity stream. I do have an image. I wonder if I could share the image. Okay, maybe this is the point where I can, okay, so I'm looking at my buttons on my end because I'm the host, and I'm looking for something that looks like a share. No, we have 8 viewers, by the way, which is nice. Yeah, I don't see a share video screen. But
now I cannot see you. Maybe.
Oh, okay. Can you see me now? Can you hear me?
You disappeared from my.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
But can you see me yet? Because I've, what happened was I flipped over to another browser.
Okay.
Am I still blank? Okay, Danielle says she can see and hear us both. So
okay, perfect. No, it's good. It's good.
Okay, all right. Well, okay. Let me just. And again, this is just. I mean, I'm sort of, on one hand, I'm a kind of a chief medical officer, kind of dealing with medical stuff and software and workflows. But I have worked as a junior programmer. And when I was a graduate student, I programmed in a lot of languages, a lot of different languages.
Yeah.
Okay? Nothing. And so while I never took a comparative programming language course, because I programmed in Lisp and Prolog and Forth and C# and Java and now Jolie, I kind of get a sense of, that philosophy. So the program that I wrote that I kind of wanted to explore Jolie's concurrency, I wrote a program which basically had a couple of programs with sequential steps.
Yeah.
And then they called and then I called out to other programs, okay, in parallel, okay, using the parallel workflow operator, the vertical pipe, okay.
The pipe, yeah.
And then I printed to the console, okay.
Yeah.
So when each step executed, each service executed, it would print to the console.
Yeah.
And then I inserted sleep clauses, sleep statements that would delay certain steps. And what I was interested in doing was just kind of proving to myself that when my orchestrator called out to these different services, that they indeed did happen in different orders without blocking each other.
Yeah.
That was just my, that was kind of like, programming 101. It was like, almost. And certainly, I could see how. Okay, so here's another question for you. I saw a reference to a visual editor, Jolie editor. I might have been a grad student at one of the Italian universities. A visual IDE, which do you have any ideas of? Is there a nice fit between Jolie's kind of workflow message passing paradigm and being able to, for people to drag and drop and create workflows, or not? Not so far. We have an editor, a text editor that is. We have a plugin for Atom. I don't know if you know it. Atom, yes, I've installed it. Yeah, works great. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very good. But we are still working on a visual
graphical.
No.
composer.
Well, so what you're saying is you're not saying that that would not be a good area to go into, which but rather but simply that you haven't devised or created that particular piece of software or to accomplish that.
No, we have just some few projects, very experimental, that are not so. They cannot be used now for a graphical representation of Jolie. We have a Jolie Enterprise that is a console for deploying and controlling the microservices you deploy. Okay. This exists and it works. We have in some.
Well, we are about 2/3 of the way through, which was planned to be an hour-long conversation. So it's kind of like when you start, you're very, very general, and then you kind of dive down into the details.
Yeah.
Which I think we did. We actually got to look at the code, which is great. Now I kind of want to start to zoom back out again a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think if I saw correctly, there's a kind of an Italian consultancy company that specializes in building Jolie-based systems. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are you involved in that?
Yes, of course. I'm speaking from it.
Okay.
This
tell me about some of the. Great. Yeah, there's the URL. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, to other folks that are watching, I want to mention the Atom editor because if you want to play around with almost any language, but including Jolie, there's a plugin, and then there's things are highlighted. Yeah. In terms of the color of the function of what the syntax, which is a great way to experiment with.
But there is also the linter that corrects syntax errors before.
And that's okay, so back to the tell me a little. I know they're not in healthcare, but tell me about some of the real world applications of Jolie from your perspective, enterprise or whatever.
So far,
industrial. Yes.
And so far we are focusing now on medium enterprises in Italy that usually are from manufacturing area, and they are using Jolie for administrative flows, documentations and archivation of documentation or something like this. And they are very happy because they can design and develop the flows by their own. This is one of the main advantages, but I think that Balint could be explaining it better because it is actually using Jolie and his company, and they had a lot of benefits in this because they can just I don't know how to say, they can just instead of using external consultants, okay, they can use they can exploit their own human resources for developing a lot of different. Yes, they are quite independent from these consultants, and they can just in very few days develop their workflows for just governing all the documentation they have to deal with. It's administrative issues or something like this. Okay.
So essentially, you're using when they're in the business process management or workflow management systems industry, you have people who aren't programmers developing workflows.
Yes.
Now here we're talking about programmers developing workflows, but because Jolie is a relatively easy to learn.
Yes, this is one of the main advantages.
That's still empowering, so to speak. That still allows the non-Jolie expert to be able to program those workflows.
Yes. We have some customers that they didn't know anything about workflows, but now they are able to build distributed architectures with orchestrators inside because the language is so, so tailored on this kind of stuff that the developer just starting to think in this way. So it's very easy for him to manage this kind of the issues. And
also it seems like if you've already know a little bit about Java and C#, that it makes a lot of sense too, even though your message passing is a bit different. The syntax is similar in some ways.
Okay, I think that the best knowledge for a developer of Jolie developer is to know also a little bit of Java, because we use a lot of Java when we want to integrate Jolie with other applications. Since in Java there are a lot of
That's
libraries.
what I wanted to ask you about, were the adapters. And that is, so Jolie has got to be able to talk to a lot of other systems that aren't written in Jolie.
Yeah.
How does that work?
We exploit the Java service. I don't know if you check it in the documentation. There is the Java service possibility. That means that you can put all your legacy Java code inside a Java service and then interact with it as it is a Jolie microservice. Okay, we did this with the SAP, for example, and then we can interact. We can build a microservice and interact with SAP as it is a microservice. Okay, and for building this kind of connectors, we just always use some Java libraries that you can find in the internet in a very easy way.
Now, I know that Balint did a talk, I guess. You had a couple of days ago, didn't you have like a day-long conference about Jolie, is that, or microservices? Yeah,
we organized this conference here in Bologna, in Italy, and because we would like to start a community here about microservices. Since everybody now is started talking about microservices, and since we have this technology that is very powerful, we would like to help people to be together and to grow together, to build a big community on this area. And it was a successful day. We are very happy about this. There were
how many attendees did you have?
Well, I think we had 40 people from different companies and university, and it was we are very happy about this because we organized it in a few days, and then a lot of people came. And then
was that conference relatively Jolie centric, or were there other microservice technologies?
It was a little bit biased on Jolie, okay, but we talked also about containers and Dockers and all the stuffs that are very known now that in microservice. But the interesting point, I don't know if you check the vision we put in the website of Jolie, because we realized that with Jolie we have a different approach on microservice, because usually microservices are approached from the system perspective. So everything must be deployed inside a container, and then you have to use tools for managing containers. Okay, this is this mainstream approach. But since we are approaching the microservice topic from a linguistic approach, for us, a microservice is a software artifact that you have to develop. And then after you developed it, you decide where to deploy. You can just put a Jolie microservice inside a container if you want, or you can just deploy it in your local, in your machine, just writing Jolie on your console. Okay. So it's up to you, for us, in our perspective. But if you move to the mainstream approach on microservice, you are quite forced to put everything inside a containers, and then you can orchestrate containers each other. From our perspective, the two approaches can be merged together, in the sense that if you approach microservice both from a linguistic approach and a system approach, I think that you can see that the software production chain will be completely revolutionized, because you think in a different way, you deploy in a different way, and the system will appear completely different.
Because we have a mixture of folks in the audience, some of whom are programmers and some aren't, some know what a container is and some don't. So just like earlier, I said, could you please explain a microservice? What's a container? And then relate that to the advantage or disadvantage of container-based versus linguistic-based microservices.
The container is a software artifact that is able to isolate the execution of your application inside a sort of sandbox. Okay, so you can put inside a container any kind of technology you want. You can deploy it inside a container, a Java application, Ruby application, Node.js application. You can choose any technology you want, And then you deploy the container. This means that from a system point of view, you have to manage a set of containers. You don't see the technology that is inside, because you just see a container, and each container is related to a specific functionality. And then your system is just a composition of containers. Okay, so the container introduces an abstraction on the application you are dealing with. And usually a microservice is deployed inside a container, usually.
Right. And so the microservices can make calls to each other in other containers.
Sorry, can you repeat?
So a microservice in container A can talk to microservice in container B.
Absolutely, yes. This is why some tools like Docker and Kubernetes, Swarm, and so on allows you to create connections among containers, allows you to move a container from one host to another host, allows you to scale a container, because one of the main advantages of microservices is that they can be dynamically scaled. You can, if your load is increasing and your microservice is not able to serve all the requests, you can scale them, just cloning them and making your infrastructure more able to respond to all the requests that is coming, okay? So the main idea, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are heading, we've got
No.
about 9 minutes left here. So, but I did want to get in this question.
Yeah.
I think Balint, it sounds like folks are starting to use Jolie within companies.
Yeah.
Do you see any role for Jolie in terms of, let's say, trading partners or supply chain, where you've got more than one company that needs to sort of glue maybe peer-to-peer, whatever, or better orchestrate their transactions, their interactions between the companies?
Between two companies, two different
Yes.
companies. Yes, of course, you can use it because we have some projects for smart cities when we would like to orchestrate different entities, okay? But the idea is that Jolie is independent from the protocol you can use. So this means that when you want to collaborate with another company, you can just expose your APIs in like a web service, like a REST APIs, and so you can interact with other different technologies if you want, okay? So
even like you could imagine, like in an IoT or Internet of Things world,
yes,
you might have a device that's talking Bluetooth to something.
Yeah,
it's talking native Jolie to other microservices, but it's also making REST calls.
Yes,
and so forth and so on.
Yeah, one of the main idea of Jolie is that first of all you just program the microservice, and then you decide which kind of protocol to use for exposing it, which kind of how many ports you want. In the example of Balint, for example, if you go to the orchestrator, you can see that there are two input ports, one at line 36, one at line 43. Both of them, they expose the same operations, but the first one is on protocol SODEP, that is our Jolie protocol, and the second one use HTTP.
What lines are those? What lines are those?
In the orchestrator line 36 and 43.
36 and 43. Okay, so 36 is input port, server port.
There are two input ports.
Yeah, and so SODEP, that's the Jolie
SODEP,
native.
yes, our custom protocol. Okay. We suggest to use it when you want to make a communication between two Jolies. But if you want to communicate with other, you can select other protocols. Here you have two ports. Both of them are the microservice is listening in the 8004 in HTTP and in 8003 in SODEP. Okay, and the behavior is the same.
Well, you'd be a good person to ask this question, and I'll kind of close with this question, and we can run 5 minutes past the hour because we really didn't get started until 5 minutes past the hour here. But the question is, could you kind of contrast, in healthcare, there's a lot of excitement about, in healthcare, of course, every industry probably feels this way, but health IT feels that it's behind other industries, other modern practices and software. And so right now we're very excited about, oh my gosh, application programming interfaces. What a wonderful idea to open up, for example, electronic health records. And so we're adopting REST tech-based APIs. But I read a very interesting blog post, and it might have been by you or one of your colleagues, about sort of REST versus microservices. Okay, kind of the, because with REST you kind of have, kind of 4 basic actions, whereas microservices you have an indefinite number. Okay, you wrote that. Yeah, it was very, very interesting. Do you, in looking ahead, maybe 5 or 10 years, do you see REST as just kind of, I don't want to say going away, but it's going to become more and more of a legacy technology, won't it, relative to the more modern microservice architectures, or not?
Good question. I cannot see the future, so my opinion is just an opinion.
What would you like to happen?
What I would like, I don't like REST. I'm very honest, because I think that if you just can rely on 4 kind of operations, everything must move on the data side, okay? Because of course, and it is not the case that REST services are based upon data and not on the operations. But as you can see also in Jolie, microservices maybe are more focused on operations, so on the actions you can do, okay? So I think that REST can be a good technology, but I don't like it very much, because I'm quite not so comfortable with just 4 actions to be used, and
and of course, and then REST has to use resources.
Yes, it is focused on resources. Yes,
to kind of make up for the fact that you don't have as many you can't define additional actions.
But maybe just for managing just a resource of data, maybe REST could be a good choice, okay? Because you have just an amount of data you want to manage, and then maybe an approach based on resources could be a good approach. But on top of this, when you want to build workflows, I think that the approach on resources is not very good. You have to change. And I think that an approach based on actions, like could be Jolie or other technology like web services, something like this, is better for governing processes.
Well, that's fantastic. Claudio, thank you for jumping in here.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me. And,
yeah. And you're Claudio, I believe. Are you who's behind the Jolie Lang Twitter account? Is that you?
Who is behind?
Who is the admin? When someone goes to JOLIELANG on Twitter.
Okay, on Twitter. It depends. Sometimes I am behind it, or maybe Fabrizio.
Okay, sometimes you are. Okay. So I just want to encourage people to follow that Twitter account, JOLIELANG. I think you've got like 40 or 60 followers. I think you follow 6 people, including me. Thank you very much. Very honored. I do want to, this is about building community. And so as we end here, I'd like to kind of point out some folks that are in the audience. And in fact, Nate De Niro, who just joined us.
Yeah.
In fact, I think in about 15 minutes, I'm talking to Nate on Google Hangout. So Nate, maybe you could post the link. Nate, and he does a series on Google Hangout called distributed healthcare. Distributed healthcare. So distributed computing in healthcare. And he's going to ask now, I don't know what we're going to talk about. I'm not an expert about distributed computing. I'm interested in workflow, and I'm interested in how distributed technologies can help. And Claudio, thank you so much for jumping in when we had some technical issues that prevented Balint from here. But thank you very much, Balint, who is still there in the activity stream. And Danielle, I think InnoNurse, INNONURSE, is that correct, Danielle? Just to call out. Yes, please. So Nate, please, there it is. There's the YouTube link. So Claudio and whoever else, there's a link there. In about 15 minutes, I'm going to be talking to Nate about distributed healthcare workflow. So I know you're busy, but I do. And also, I wanted to mention another individual here who isn't on Twitter a lot, and that's Mark Copenhaver. Mark Copenhaver doesn't even have his avatar there, and I worked with Mark, a decade and a half ago, and he created an electronic health record that was based on a workflow engine service model. So you had services in the engine, and users would create what were called work plans. So work plan was basically a process model, and so the users could change their workflows, and you could track things, and it was transparent. And so he's moved on and is doing lots of interesting things. So I'm just delighted, Mark, that you could make it. And the couple of other folks here who I don't recognize, but I do recognize Manish. Manish is in India, and he is very influential in health IT social media. So he's constantly blasting. So Manish, what is your Twitter account, Manish? Just so that people can see it and follow it.
Yes.
In fact, Nate and Danielle, post your Twitter accounts too, because I want to build community. Well, thank you. We have finally come to the end. This is basically replayable. If you come back to firetalk.com/waereflow, WAEFLO, which stands for software workflow, but lose the soft and lose the W at the end. And this is not a regular broadcast. It just organically comes from me wanting to learn from really smart people like Claudio and Balint. And so, Claudio, are you ready to head off to your Christmas family?
Thank you very much. Yeah. Tomorrow we will have we are go for shopping for presents, and then on Christmas we will be on our family and for having a big lunch together. And
I see Azenjen mentioned that he works with banks and they're starting to use Jolie in a banking context. And I'm after I talk to Nate, I'm going to pick up my mother at the airport, and then we're going to the grocery store to buy turkey and mashed potatoes and cranberries. And everybody, Merry Christmas. And for the third or fourth time, thank you so much, Claudio. And I'm
thank you very much.
To,
Happy Christmas to everybody.
Maybe a year from now, we'll have another just before Christmas to see what has happened in the Jolie space in the last 365 days.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.